Okay, here we go with part two, family life and Jehovah's Witnesses. Paul worked Holiday Inns all the way down to Florida, and the adventure was basically fun. But his narcolepsy and my pregnancy appeared almost simultaneously. The band leader was constantly trying to shortchange the other band members, and the organ player was a blind man. That's a serious douche to rip off a blind man. We finally had enough and saved the money we would have spent on a room at the Holiday Inn by staying in a tent. Some fellow campers told us about a health ranch, and since I was pregnant, we thought that was probably a good idea to investigate. So we went down to Arcadia, Florida, and picked fruit in exchange for our keep. There was a doctor that would lecture about natural foods and all kinds of priceless information almost every night. He told me I was playing a dirty trick on that baby by bringing it into this world. I really didn't want to be pregnant. I just didn't have enough self-esteem to think that I had a choice, and with no game plan, that became a game plan. Paul's mother sent us $350 to drop a new engine in the 40 Econoline van. So we lived in a tent in Florida from June through August and a tent in Iowa from September through October, and into a renovated chicken coop in November, delivering in December. It's a good thing Sarah didn't come on the date that we thought she was due. That was the big blizzard of January 1975. The house my father-in-law bought us was in a small town called Gaza, one of only two in the world. The other is in Palestine. This house had no heat except for two wood stoves. A warm morning stove that had brick lining so you could heat with coal. And a laundry stove which was long and narrow, and what they used to put a copper boiler on top of to boil water for laundry, hence the name. We have a huge garden, and my daughter never had Gerber baby food. I made all of it. We also had a strawberry and asparagus patch. It was almost a self-imposed poverty while the rest of the world was getting ahead. I found being a new mother to be a very lonely experience. I did try breastfeeding, but unknowingly ate food like broccoli and pizza, which gives your milk a lot of gas. Plus, I was just nervous and high-strung as a person anyway. I would later learn that I had off-the-chart anxiety. I remember thinking, okay, she's sleeping now. What can I do that's either something I can finish while she's asleep or be interrupted and go back to it? It was always looming over my head and caused a lot of anxiety on its own. I got a little better when she got somewhat older. Teaching her was probably the part that I enjoyed the most. I remember the day she said hi after a nap at about 5 months old. And about 6 months old, she could identify the moon. She was a year old before she talked about koki, which was coffee, and avis, which were flowers, but we didn't let her talk baby talk because if she was going to be bilingual, it needed to be a recognized language. About the time Sarah was 18 months old, she got on the phone with her grandmother, Paul's mother, says, "Hi, Grandma, I'm on vacation in Wisconsin." Or she would run up and down the halls of the Holiday Inn saying, Hi, Daddy plays drums." She was all of about 2 feet high. It was pretty funny. But life was about to change drastically. Jehovah's Witnesses knocked on our door and wanted to save our heathen souls. The couple was sent from headquarters in Brooklyn to work our county and the one next to us because their numbers in those counties weren't very good. We were living together in sin, and they convinced us that legal marriage made us clean in the eyes of God. Gag. So we got legally married at Newton Hills State Park. I was the perfect target because they were very judgmental, and that piece fit for me. I was raised that way. Also, they do a love bombardment when you first show interest. This is because they are counting their time going door to door that they need to turn into Brooklyn headquarters. People are falling all over themselves to invite you to dinner because they will talk about spiritual things and count their time to report to headquarters the easy way. Once you're baptized, they continue that for a short time, and then you're expected to turn around and do it for others. I was so love-starved, I thought I'd hit the jackpot until I really got involved, and then, as they say, it was a little too late. Paul did not become baptized as a witness, and that caused problems at the time. In the end, I have mad respect for him not being duped. Our original congregation was in Sheldon, Iowa. When we moved from Geza to Cherokee, Iowa, there was a congregation there, although so completely dysfunctional, hardly recognizable. It was a complete patriarchy, and the penises had the power. I was a female with a brain and a mouth. In the end, it was my saving grace. For instance, when it became fashionable for men to get their ears pierced, Jehovah's Witnesses said that was a practice associated with the gay community and an abomination unto the Lord. I asked them about Exodus 32, 2 through 4, where it says, "Take the gold earrings from the ears of your wives, your sons, and your daughters, and bring them to me." Verse 3, "So all the people began taking off the gold earrings that were in their ears and bringing them to Aaron. He took the gold from them and formed it with an engraving tool and made it into a statue of a calf." I said, "Here it plainly states that men wore earrings, and I doubt they had clip-ons." It was pretty much downhill from there. The highest position a woman could achieve in that organization on her own was called a regular pioneer. You are a volunteer worker going door to door 90 hours a month. There are lots of feel-goods and ego strokes for someone who does this, and so I did. You get lots of speaking parts at convention. I even got to play Wicked Queen Jezebel at Devaney Sports Center in Lincoln in front of 7,000 to 8,000 people. It must have been believable because there was a little boy that had to come backstage and make sure that Queen Jezebel was not really eaten by dogs. But as time goes on, I could not keep quiet about things going on. I was later publicly stripped of that title regular pioneer because I could no longer endure my marriage and separated from my husband. I was on the phone with an elder for hours, making sure that what I was doing was okay and I would not be deleted from the pioneer list. In the end, all the yeses were no and all the nos were yeses. It really kicked the foundation out from under me at the time. The elders came to visit, told me they would hate to be in my shoes when Jehovah judges. Sounds a little bit like they were already doing the judging to me. I was so shamed back into my marriage, and yet my eyes had been opened somewhat about Jehovah's Witnesses, and I was completely disillusioned. When Sarah was 18, there was a JW wedding, and of course they rolled up the carpet at 9 o'clock because of their Sunday morning meeting. The young people were not having it, so they decided to get a pony keg and go to the Hilton, ironically in room 911. My daughter and her boyfriend went to this party, and Sarah my daughter and her boyfriend went to this party, and Sarah ended up violently sick. The elders had been waiting to catch her doing something wrong for years because they felt she was a negative influence in the congregation, and this looked like the big break. I was in Kansas City at Charter Hospital trying to get myself regulated on medication for depression because my repressed memories of sexual abuse were starting to surface in that climate of male dominance and oppression. Kangaroo court was held, and they tried to get her disfellowship before I got back. They had young people from South Dakota, Nebraska, all over come testify against Sarah. The presiding elder got so angry he shut the meeting down after young people from 5 hours away came to testify on Sarah's behalf. Much to their chagrin, I got out of Charter Hospital early and came storming back. I will spare you the details, but they railroaded through a wrongful disfellowshipping of my daughter. They were concerned because my husband was not a JW, so they had us meet them in the parking lot of McDonald's to tell us their decision. I said to Sarah, "Well, it looks like you've been disfellowshipped." Sarah said, "Well, I'm pissed." And her father said, "Well, then you need to appeal." A little humor in the midst of complete anger. When that happens, you have 7 days to appeal their decision. Sarah had so little faith in the elders, she sent her appeal letter via registered mail. In the end, they had to apologize to us, and we moved to a different congregation there in Sioux City. They disfellowshipped her for an allergic reaction. Okay. They disfellowshipped her for an allergic reaction to fish that they were in a blind rage convinced was drunkenness. I also had a Bible student at this time who was raised as a Jehovah's Witness and molested by her Jehovah's Witness father. Of course, as a teenager, she acted out, and the result was she got disfellowshipped. I was incensed when I heard her story and demanded they reopen the case. The elders sided with her aging father and told her she needed to forgive him. This kind of injustice on this subject was more than I could bear. It sent me plummeting into depression even further, but I still could not connect all the dots on my own abuse. Repressed memory syndrome. In 1994, we attended a district convention of Jehovah's Witnesses in Kansas City. It was such a different atmosphere, and Sarah absolutely loved it. She could not find desirable paralegal opportunities in Sioux City or Omaha, so she asked if we all wanted to relocate to Kansas City. We did just that on November 4th, 1994. Her father could easily transfer working for Gateway Computers, and I could build a cleaning business anywhere. But the secretary of the congregation writes a letter to the congregation in Kansas City to introduce new members and send their publisher record card, which records all the time they spent going door to door. This is a letter about you that you are not privy to reading. It was clear that they had blackballed us, telling a version of what happened to exonerate themselves, and after about 18 months of it, we liberated ourselves from that judgmental, hypocritical cult. As you can imagine, between the problems that I had from the abuse, which was complex PTSD, and then raising my daughter Sarah as a JW, she and I are still somewhat estranged and probably always will be. So basically I went from June Cleaver to Paris Hilton overnight, divorcing my husband and pretty much picking up where I left off before I lost my freedom. Acting like a 22-year-old in a 42-year-old body, I could see what was going on and absolutely could not stop myself. I got the house in the divorce, so I rented out 3 rooms and basically lived there for free. I did not vet the applicants very carefully. If they had green money and liked to party, they could live with me. I went out about 5 nights a week, drinking and dancing, and finally feeling somewhat alive after being oppressed, repressed, and depressed as a witness. One night when we were out, a guy offered me some of his pizza and asked if he could take me out on a lunch date the next day. After the way my husband and I got together, a date was a very welcome thing in my world. He was a single father and would not tell me how old he was. Finally, I snooped through his wallet, and he was the same age as my stepson. God, I felt like a pedophile. Since I wasn't driving, I got over the top drunk on every date. He didn't mind because he could fuck me and then go to Westport after midnight and try to find himself something younger, which he did. And he knocked her up, so better her than me. I was having no menopause babies. The night I found out about this, I got completely wasted and tried to drive to the Northland to confront him. Of course, I was arrested for a DUI and had to call him to come bail me out. We had a parting of the ways, although he contacted me a few months later and wanted to reconnect. I wouldn't, so he fabricated the story that I key scratched his car to the tune of $1,500. I went up to talk to the detective and also had other witnesses do the same. Much to my surprise, the police came knocking on my door on the 4th of July with an arrest warrant. I told them the situation had been taken care of by talking to the detective. I was wrong. My neighborhood was having a block party, so I got to do the walk of shame to the police cruiser, hands cuffed behind my back. I was put in the front seat of the car, so I decided to entertain the troops. One of the policemen was from Pella, Iowa, and I gave him shit about being a Dutch boy. This was not good on top of the DUI, but certainly textbook for someone with unaddressed childhood trauma. My friends scraped together bail money and came to bail me out later. I remember being in jail with a black woman who said she had been arrested for weeds that were too tall in her yard. Yep, for real. But I seriously doubted her at the time. She begged me to get her out once I got out. I was able to raise bail money quickly, and she had been there for a few days already. I had not heard of white privilege at that time, but this would be a stellar example. While all of this was pending, I met a man who would become my fiancé. As irony would have it, my defense attorney was a brother-in-law, as irony would have it, my defense attorney was a brother to the new boyfriend's coke dealer, which would come to light way later. It explains why he wouldn't support me at this time, so I went to court alone. Because the former boyfriend had made things up and padded the numbers to get a new paint job on his truck, the charge was a felony. Even he could not go through with this charade, so he did not show up in court, and it was dismissed. I also asked for it to be expunged from the record. Of course, I couldn't let it go with that. I took him to small claims court. The first time he asked for a continuance, because he couldn't round up anybody to come to court and lie for him. Of course, I was drunk at court and had more on the way home. And in the car on the way home, I called and left a message on his answering machine saying that I had it expunged from the record, and the judge assigned to our case was this same judge that just expunged it. The next time he found someone who could lie well and describe me from head to toe. Most people can't even remember what they wore yesterday. This was months later. He also brought the answering machine recording, which made it sound like the judge would be ruling in my favor, and she recused herself. The next judge came in and just awarded in his favor out of irritation. He actually called a couple of years later and thought it would be a good idea for us to meet for a drink. I talked to him briefly because I wanted to know how his son was doing, but told him on no uncertain terms would I ever meet with him after what happened. Sorry. I don't know if I can stop this and start it again, or if it starts a new video. Alright. And of course I lost my place. Okay. The fiancé was very glad when it was all over and he could carry on his Friday fry. Every Friday at 4 o'clock, his friends would come over and bring their own booze. I would have hors d'oeuvres, and they would pick up their coke or their pot. I did not know he was a dealer until 2 weeks before he died. It was actually quite fun to have something like that to look forward to every Friday, but these were very unpredictable, addicted people, as I was about to find out. About 3 months after meeting Robert, I remember the day he said he didn't feel good. And that was November 17th. That year was a very dark winter because we didn't do much, and I thought he was a hypochondriac. Well, on April 12th, I had finally had enough and told him that I was making him a doctor's appointment. He had been drinking a bottle of Southern Comfort to try to kill the pain, with huge hematomas all over his body. He really needed to be seen, so he reluctantly went to the doctor. When the doctor came out of the waiting room, he told me we were to go straight to the emergency room. He said, "I don't know what's wrong, but I know sick when I see it." We were in the emergency room 4 hours before he was admitted upstairs. He looked like an AIDS patient with Kaposi sarcoma. Finally, when they tested his PSA, it was 1,250. 1 through 4 is considered normal. So he was admitted and told that if he didn't take chemo immediately, he had 2 weeks to live. So that was a no-brainer, and I stayed every night with him in the hospital. Even got in the hospital bed with him because my friend Jeannie said that was one of the loneliest places that you could ever end up. It was quite a roller coaster for about 18 months. Robert was able to work with the help of cocaine. Once he deteriorated enough to need hospice, his friends would come over and party all night with him so that he could sleep all day and not have to be around his mother. I would come home from work and put out fires with his relatives that he had started every day. I needed their help so I could continue to work. I was still not aware that he was selling cocaine at this time. About 2 weeks before his demise, the partying and the drug dealing was getting crazy at his house. Once hospice told me they were not going to continue because they could not jeopardize their workers under these circumstances with drugs. It got me thinking as to why I would do that to myself. I ended up having to put him in a nursing home because the situation was so out of hand and nobody was qualified to handle it. Within 24 hours of being admitted to Carondelet Healthcare, Robert had turned a drug deal for his friends. So he got himself kicked out of there and ended up at Swope Park Nursing Home. Shortly before he died, I had a pizza party sleepover with him. I was glad because 2 days later, I got the call about 3:30 in the morning that he was very close to the end. So I got there with my clothes on inside out and just held his hand and told him all the people that loved him. I gave him permission to go ahead and cross over, that he would be missed, that nobody wanted to see him in pain. Then I started in on Sarah McLachlan's song, "In the Arms of the Angels." I got through one verse and one chorus and he was out of here. Later the joke was that I killed him with my singing. He opened his eyes like he saw somebody before taking his last breath. From that experience, I would not be afraid to be with someone who is transitioning. You just don't want to be seeing somebody dying an ugly death, gasping for air. That experience was like having open heart surgery with no anesthesia. All of my abandonment issues came flooding in on me. I was functioning at about a 4-year-old capacity. You ever watched a 4-year-old drive a car or balance a checkbook or go to work? It was grim. I drank daily and nightly. After grieving for about a year, I thought I better get back on the horse and ride, so I started another year of 50 first dates. Then one day I was cleaning hallways in an apartment complex on the plaza, and the door opened. There was a strapping, gorgeous man filling the doorway with his 6'4" frame, salt and pepper curly hair, and huge green eyes. He had just moved here from Austin, Texas, and was a southern gentleman. We really clicked, especially in the bedroom. But he only wanted to get together basically Wednesdays and Saturdays. He was close to his female cousin, so he got companionship and conversation from her, or he would have been looking for it with me. If he thought we started to get too close, he would back away for 2 or 3 months. That abandonment just cut me to my core because of it being my original issue. During one of our hiatuses, I bought a condo. When we reconnected, he said, "I wish you'd consulted me. Condos are very tricky because you're entering into a business agreement with people you have never met as far as the HOA goes." So I ran for board president because I wanted to have a say in what went on. I was elected by the people, and according to the rules, the newest member takes the lowest position, which was secretary treasurer. Have you met me? Yeah, numbers and taking notes, 2 of my most hated things. I made a statement as a board member that got me called a racist to my face for the very first time in my life. The same developer that did our condos owned the rental property next door. These folks seemed to think our property was fair game for them as well, and would come use our pool. As a result, umbrella chairs, tables, etc. were ruined. So when I was on the board, I said I'm not buying new things for this fifth generation welfare entitlement bunch. My context for welfare abuse was white people, 96% white in Iowa. People who committed welfare fraud were 99% white. Now I understand how that landed on my audience, and I am truly ashamed. It was my boyfriend who very kindly said to me one time, "You know, I love you, but you're always in conflict with someone." Because he was so sweet about it, I could hear it and take it to heart. The first thing I did was remove myself from the board.